logistics company One Logix has reported an increase in interim results for the 6 months to end November 2013. Joining us to explain more is One Logix Chief Executive Ian Lourens. It's interesting, we're going to be talking to Jeff Blunt a little bit later from Cannon Asset Management, and he makes the point that last year the big caps were down in their profits, yet their ratings improved. The small caps were up 20% in their profits, yet the ratings went down. Now you just emphasized that your earnings up, core earnings up 35% in this period. The share price has really hopped today, but up until now, you must be a bit disappointed at the way the market's appreciating.
Well, I'm quite happy. I mean, from a personal point of view, it might be a problem, but in terms of acquiring shares, but by and large, we're very happy with what's happened.
That the market's depressing?
Oh no, how we've responded to today's results. But yeah, we are. But you know, the way we look at it, Alec, is that we just get on and do our business, and the markets will look after themselves.
But do you get calls from investment analysts? Are the institutions coming to visit?
They do. I think on occasion they come and have a look at us down at the lower end of the pile, and they do ask a couple of probing questions. But by and large, as I said, our mission is really just to carry on doing what we do well and put our heads down and produce the results.
Management work for shareholders, and it's nice to have strong shareholders if you want to do bigger acquisitions.
Of course. Don't forget, One Logix shareholders, management has about 60% of the shareholding in any event. But we're getting some nice interest out in the marketplace, which I'm very happy about. And of course, I think people over time watch and see that you perform according to what you said you were going to do, and thankfully that's what we've been able to do. Because this period shows our 5th consecutive positive result post the downturn.
Well, you're coming onto radar screens because today the share price is up 22%. And that's a big hop in your market cap.
Yes.
The business is interesting. I described it earlier as almost like a mini Bidvest. It's a mini conglomerate in some ways. You do have a theme, but when you've got a panel beater and PostNet and some of the other businesses that you've got, the logistics businesses in there, it is spread.
Yes, you're quite right. We do see a theme as logistics in South and Southern Africa, but the fact is we are decentralized. We believe we're quite empowering. The other word we use very often is we're entrepreneurial. In fact, we've identified entrepreneurs who run businesses who've kind of reached a ceiling, and then we provide them with a platform to step up and we take them further along. All of us in the group that run the businesses are entrepreneurs. So all the businesses we have are run by the guys that started those businesses. And the way we like to think of entrepreneurs is they're people not only that can see things that others can't, because they often come a dime a dozen, but the fact is you've got to translate that into action. You've got to turn it into something tangible that adds sustainable value. And I think the mix of management that we've got now kind of does that more than it doesn't. So we're getting that right, we believe.
Do you have a kind of a task team that has a look at potential acquisitions, given that you're looking at the person that you're buying rather than necessarily the business?
Correct. The answer is it's not formal. But there's informal radar that we have out in the marketplace all the time. So whenever we interact with the market, which is often as to whether it's suppliers or customers or whatever the case might be, we pretty much keep our eyes open as to what's going on. And we've got a model which starts to work. You know, over the period of time that we've been we were on Altex from 2004, so that gives us about 10 years. We've just recently moved to the main board. We've acquired 9 companies and sold off 4. And we exited. What we sold off was out of the media space. We were moving newspapers. But
moving newspapers, very smart move to get out of that one.
So we got that kind of right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've acquired 9 companies, and they've proven to be reasonably successful. So we think we know what we're looking for. We think we know who we're looking for, and I think we also know what we need to do to integrate it and bed it down properly into the organisation. There's a very clear model that we have, and thankfully we get it more right than we get wrong.
The who? Good and bad. Two personality types, perhaps, from experience.
Well, it's a very instinctive thing. You kind of just get an idea of when you walk into a business and you can feel the vibe that the person that's running it is respected. His opinion counts, but he's got a good esprit de corps. He's got an enabling culture that actually makes a lot of sense. And so you look at that right throughout the whole spectrum once you get into due diligence and that sort of thing, and just see whether that is consistent with what you're seeing. So if they're able to produce results and they've got the kind of vibe, we call it, that kind of will make sure this hangs together and sustains itself going forward, that's what makes sense to us. There's not a huge amount of science in it. A lot of it is, we just kind of know that's right. But of course we go through all the objective processes we have to in terms of the due diligences and things like that. But
what
we always look at that thread.
From the inverse, though, from your mistakes?
We've learned that you've got to make sure that you allow people's space to grow, but you counter that with a quiet, gentle, controlling element. So in other words, we have budgets, for example, that we set together. We don't make sure that the guys have to stretch themselves to ridiculous levels and they know they're not going to get it and they lose enthusiasm right up front, for example. We sit down properly and we say, what can we realistically deliver? And then we agree that we'll commit to that, and off they go and they do it, and we come behind and just make sure on a periodic basis, more informally than formally, by the way, as to how they're going. And if they're going well, great, go and do it. If they're not, then we'll step in and do what we need to do. And you know, we obviously get together as a group. We kind of celebrate our successes. If there's anything tough that's got to get done, it gets done outside of the meeting. So it's a kind of a praise in public and deal with difficult issues in private kind of approach.
Well, you've got a formula that's working in. We'll be watching your shares in future. I'm sure there are a lot of people who bought them today who will be watching them even more closely. Over the past period, well, you got as high as $4, you're down to R3.50, but more than doubled since 2012, and a nearly 600 million market cap now. Just an off-the-wall question, the budget coming up the end of the month. Any thoughts on what you might hope to see there?
I mean, we like this idea that infrastructure is getting a lot of attention. It makes sense for logistics companies to do that. We're focusing very heavily on Africa, Southern Africa particularly. So we would like to see things like not only the seaports but the land ports to become much more efficient. So that's the sort of thing that we'd be looking at, other than the more general things about tax and that sort of thing. We think that we would just like to see an environment that really looks at enabling a business. And of course, since we've been talking entrepreneurship, you know, I often think that that's those entrepreneurs that are out there are unsung heroes. And we give a lot of verbal input into supporting them, but we don't really seem to do a hell of a lot about it. And I'd like to see a lot more practical steps that are implemented to kind of put that forward, because if we're looking to create jobs, that's where it's going to happen.